Let's talk about Symfony Components and Symfony Framework. When you're about to start a new project, you might be in a position to decide if you want to use whole Symfony Framework or just few Symfony components. General rule is to start with only what you need, right? I want to show you in just a moment how to build an application using Symfony components only and then build the same application with Symfony Framework as a base structure. So first, we need to come up with some requirements. I'm going to build a simple CLI script which sends email notifications. In this case, we only need a console and a mailer Symfony components. We also need one file which is combining those things together. We want to answer the question, do we start with a very basic setup or do we want to set up a Symfony framework from the start? So let's begin. First, I want to configure app namespace inside my composer.json file. Then I can import Symfony console and mailer components via composer. Once that's finished, I'm adding index.php file where I need to import default composer autoload file. I can create my CLI example command, adjust namespace at the top, and add a quick test hello message output. I go back to my index.php and now I can initialize application class from a console component and start registering my commands. Once I've confirmed there are no errors and I see hello message output, I can go back to my command and write a part where I send email. I inject my mailer into the command via constructor, then I create an email class, specify some details, and I send via send method. At the top of the index.php, I need to now initialize our mailer, and as an argument, I need to provide a transport, which is essentially an email provider. I chose to use Postmark email provider for this test, and it requires an API key to work. I generated this key on the Postmark website. I can now inject mailer into example command, and I confirm everything is working as expected with some real credentials this time. Our PHP CLI script is complete. As you can see, it didn't take too much time to make this work. However, there are a few things I should be worried about before this code can go into production. Let's build a version with Symfony Framework now and then compare the two. I installed the most basic Symfony Framework via Symfony CLI. I also need to install mailer component, which is not part of a default setup, as well as Symfony HTTP client with a Postmark email provider. I had to install those things as well in my earlier example, so there are no differences here. When that is finished, I copy command from earlier example into this framework because that part is not going to change. All I need to do now is to go to environment variable file and update Postmark API key. I confirm I can send emails by executing app example command, and we have a working CLI script. Let's summarize. In the example where we only used Symfony components, we've created an index.php file where a lot of things were happening. At the top of the file, we had to configure mailer provider, which takes an API key as a string. I would be concerned how that value is fixed there, so definitely that part needs more work. I most likely would install another component to deal with environment variables, for example. With index.php file, we also don't have an easy way to switch between development version and production version, so that's a downside in my view. When requirements eventually grow and add up, more dependencies we have in our index.php file, we would end up with some decisions to make to separate the code especially. I would say eventually we could end up with our own framework, which is like reinventing the wheel. And it wouldn't be a good wheel compared to what Symfony Framework provides. I hope this answered the question why it's a good way to start with a Symfony Framework as your base structure for whatever type of a project you're dealing with. I hope you've learned something new today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.